Freedom is liked by all individuals or even all living things. But freedom should be within the permissible limits. If it exceeds, you will not have the real happiness which you ought to have. Welcome once again to News Analysis. News Analysis, a weekly magazine on current affairs. To begin with the main points in a nutshell. Syria unrest, fresh protests erupt. Qaeda's selection of its chief is set to reflect its flaws. UN Security Council backs second term for Ban Ki-moon. Saudi Arabia women drive cars in protest against the ban. Strike at Maruti Suzuki called off. Anna Hazare to resume anti-graft fast. Now the news in detail. Syria unrest, fresh protests erupt. Fresh demonstrations against President Bashar al-Assad's regime have erupted across Syria, with reports at least 18 people killed by security forces. The worst of the violence appeared to have happened in the central city of Homs, Syria's third largest. Official media played down the size of the protests but said a number of policemen had been shot and wounded. Earlier, the Syrian army moved into two northern towns as it seeks to end months of anti-government protests. Tanks, armored personal carriers and buses were used to secure Marat al-Numan and Kal Sheikhoun, both on the road linking Damascus and Aleppo. The European Union is pressing for a new round of sanctions against Syria. The UN says that at least 1,100 people have died as the government has cracked down on demonstrations that began in March. Syrian rights groups put the overall death toll in Syria at 1,297 civilians and 340 security force members. Qaeda's selection of its chief is set to reflect its flaws. American counter-terrorism officials all but welcomed the announcement on Thursday that Ayman al-Zawahiri would succeed Osama bin Laden as leader of Al-Qaeda, arguing that his deep flaws are likely to weaken the core of the terrorist network. Defense Secretary Robert M. Gates said bin Laden had a peculiar charisma that I think Zawahiri does not have. He also said there was evidence that bin Laden had been more operationally engaged than Mr. Zawahiri and that Mr. Zawahiri's Egyptian roots and focus limited his appeal to militants from other countries. As for the fact that it took almost 7 weeks for Al-Qaeda to name a leader after a Navy SEAL team killed bin Laden in his Pakistan hideout, Mr. Gates added, "It's probably tough to count votes when you are in a cave." Independent specialists largely agree that Mr. Zawahiri is not an inspiring model for young militants, noting his lack of combat experience, his long history of ideological squabbles, and his abrasive manner and pedantic speeches, including a recent 6-part series of audio messages about Egypt that trailed well behind the events there. He has always been a divisive figure going back to his years in Egypt, said Brian Fishman, an expert on Al-Qaeda at the New America Foundation in Washington. He is just personally disliked by many in Al-Qaeda. His personality always gets in the way. UN Security Council backs second term for Ban Ki-moon. The UN Security Council has unanimously recommended Secretary General Ban Ki-moon for a second 5-year term. Mr. Brand told reporters in Brazil that he was deeply honored by the decision of the 15-member body and grateful for the confidence and support. But he also said he was aware of the formidable challenges ahead. With no rival for the post, the former South Korean foreign minister is almost certain to be re-elected when UN General Assembly meets on Tuesday. The 67-year-old has been criticized for being too deferential to major powers and for being too timid to confront human rights abusers. But he has won praise for his commitment to climate change, nuclear disarmament, and women's issues, and for his encouragement of the pre-democracy protest which has swept the Middle East and North Africa.
This morning, I sent a letter to the membership of the General Assembly and the Security Council, offering humbly myself for consideration for a second term as the Secretary General of the United Nations.
Saudi Arabia, women drive cars in protest at ban. Women in Saudi Arabia have been openly driving cars in defiance of an official ban on female drivers in the ultra-conservative kingdom. The direct action has been organized on social network sites where women have been posting images and videos of themselves behind the wheel. The Women to Drive Facebook page said the direct action could continue until a royal decree reversed the ban. Last month, a woman was arrested after uploading a video of herself driving. Manal al-Sharif was accused of besmirching the kingdom's reputation abroad and stirring up public opinion, but was released after 10 days having promised not to drive again. Campaigners have not called for a mass protest, which would be illegal, but have asked women who have foreign driving licenses to drive themselves as they go about their daily life. All that we need is to run our errands without depending on drivers, said one woman in the first film posted in early hours on Friday morning. The film showed the unnamed woman talking as she drove to a supermarket and parking.
If I can drive a car by myself, I do not need to have a male relative drive me. I can do my work, meet the needs of the household, such as driving the children to their schools and all the other things I need to do as part of daily life.
Strike at Maruti Suzuki call off. Workers at India's top car maker Maruti Suzuki have called off a 13-day strike which had seriously affected production. The company has agreed to reinstate 11 sacked employees, and workers have agreed not to form a new union. Nearly 2,000 workers had gone on strike demanding recognition of a new workers' union. Maruti Suzuki, a joint venture partner of Japan's Suzuki Motor Corporation, has 50% of India's booming car market. The strike had affected production at the company's main factory in Manesar in Haryana, which makes more than 1,000 cars a day. Reporters say that the company has agreed to take back 11 workers who had been dismissed for leading the strike. But it did not concede to the workers' demand for a new union. The company already has one recognized workers' union. Maruti Suzuki has 2 factories in India and plans to spend more than $1 billion over the next 3 years to boost capacity in a market where vehicle sales grew by a record 30% last year. Social activist Anna Hazare to resume anti-graft fast. Indian activist Anna Hazare has threatened to resume a hunger strike after talks with the government over anti-corruption law stalled. Mr. Hazare, who undertook a hunger strike in April to protest against the government inaction on corruption, said he would resume his fast on 16th August. The two sides are deadlocked over how powerful a new anti-graft ombudsman should be. India has recently been hit by a string of high-profile corruption scandals. Civil society members led by Mr. Hazare have been pushing the government for a strong ombudsman that will have the powers to investigate corruption charges against the Prime Minister, senior judges and MPs, among others. The government has reportedly refused to include the Prime Minister and senior judiciary under the ombudsman. Greek turmoil raises fears of instability around Europe. The instability rocking Greece this week is the latest manifestation of a troubling new phase in the global financial crisis. Political turmoil is sweeping through Europe, toppling government and threatening to undermine efforts to rescue the financial system and ultimately the Eurozone itself. It seems likely that Prime Minister George Papandreou of Greece will manage to hold his government together long enough to push through the deep cuts required for his debt-ridden country to receive its next installment of international aid.